So, we're back. Hopefully this video will be more concise than the last one, since I watched less this month. Though I feel like I have more to say about the films I watched this month, but I will try my best to keep this one more concise. Without further ado, I started the month off with a bang with this one. It's tradition for me to watch this film on Groundhog Day. It is honestly a crime that I've never done a review of this film. Bill Murray is honestly the master at playing a lovable jerk. Although he doesn't stay this way the whole film, our main character, Phil Connors, goes on an excellent character arc. This film might be my favorite film about self-improvement. This film takes an element as fantastical as a time loop, and brings it down to earth with its story about self-improvement. Most of all, this film is just really funny. Honestly, this might be my favorite Bill Murray film. I started a Martin Scorsese binge with his first feature film, Who's That Knocking at My Door? This is a very ambitious film, but it ended up letting me down. I usually love experimental films from the 60s, but for me, this just didn't work. Honestly, I felt like it was style over substance. The characters were kind of one-dimensional, and the story was really nothing to write home about. Maybe I'm being a little harsh here, but ultimately I know that Scorsese would go on to make much better films than this. There is one aspect of this film that I really enjoy, and that is the cinematography. Yes, it's very ambitious and kind of avant-garde, but I feel like that this was the only aspect I really enjoyed. Everything else for me was kind of meh. Full review is on my channel, so I'm going to keep this brief. When I initially watched this film, I gave it 4.5 stars, but on rewatch, I'm boosting it half a star. I found myself caring a lot more for these characters initially on rewatch, mainly because I knew where the plot was going to go. As said in my review, this film is kind of an anti-war film, but it has a lot of heart to it. At times, this film kind of reminded me of a Wes Anderson film, with its dark humor. I mean, visually, this film looks nothing like a Wes Anderson movie, but dialogue-wise and story-wise, this film gave me some pretty serious Wes Anderson vibes. This was a fun little romp that I watched in my film class. Now, I've never really gotten into westerns, but I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thought the performances were pretty solid, especially Haley Steinfeld. I feel like that she had the right amount of feistiness and the right amount of naivety. Jeff Bridges, as usual, was fantastic. The character Cogburn was such a fantastic character, and an excellent mentor to Maddie. Matt Damon did a fine job as LaBouffe. Nothing really spectacular here, though there is one really weird scene with him. If you've seen this film, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. I have no idea what the Coen brothers were thinking, honestly. Since it is a Coen brothers film, the cinematography here is really solid. If you are looking for a modern take on the Western genre, I would check this out. This is one of the greatest action movies ever made. James Cameron is just able to direct action in a way that no other director can even come close to replicating. The levels of suspense in the scenes in this film are just immeasurable. But the reason why this film works is its characters, especially Ripley. Now, don't get me wrong, Ripley was great in the first Alien, but here, she is even better. Exploring her maternal side was such an excellent choice here. The relationship between Ripley and Newt is honestly the glue of this film, but Ripley's character arc is the ultimate foundation of this film. It is so cool that James Cameron made such a badass film about motherhood, though I personally prefer Alien over this film. That film is just so suspenseful and so beautifully shot. It just can't be topped. Though this film is an excellent follow-up to that film. During the first few minutes of this film, I didn't get it. I just didn't really find it funny. But maybe about 15 to 20 minutes in, I was hooked. I just fell in love with the chemistry between our two main leads and their quest to create a flop. Once their bogus plan comes to fruition, I was just dying of laughter. The final product was just so absurd and so obscene, I couldn't help but find it hilarious. I also love the societal satire that is explored later. Now, not every joke in this film hits, but the ones that do have me rolling on the floor. Full review is up on my channel. I had the privilege to see this film on the big screen, with the RPO providing the soundtrack. This film is visually striking, with an excellent soundtrack. The performances are really solid also, but what ends up dragging this film down for me is some of the rushed story beats and questionable character decisions. Though this film ended up paving the way for serious adaptations on comic book characters. What can I add to the conversation here? I bet everything that I say here has already been said 100 times over. This film is probably the most popular choice, other than Citizen Kane, for the title of the greatest film of all time. When I watched this film for the first time in high school, I really didn't get it. This was the first film I watched that was over 3 hours long. And I thought the pacing was just really slow. But watching it years later, I feel like I have a deeper understanding of this film. This film is an epic in every sense of the word. It is ultimately a tale about how power can corrupt. It can take a good man and drive him deep into the ground, turning him into a cruel monster. This narrative is shown through the amazing yet tragic character arc of Michael Corleone. Also, Marlon Brando gives an excellent performance as Vito Corleone. I am not the first person to say this. His performance has been ingrained in pop culture for a very good reason. This film is definitely a slow burn, but this is completely necessary to provide world building and to fully grasp our characters. I personally believe that multiple viewings are required to fully understand this film. I watched this film on Valentine's Day. It has been on my bucket list for quite a while. This film is about how two people discover that their spouses have been probably cheating on them. They form a bond because of this shared trauma. This film took me some time to really understand. While watching this, I felt like I was constantly having to play catch-up to understand the themes that were in play here. I certainly admired the visuals and the performances, but I just wasn't grasping the themes for some reason. This film is kind of a tale of right person, wrong time, and the slow, heartbreaking realization of that. I don't want to get into further detail, but I feel like I need to watch this film again to really fully grasp it. This was such an unsettling film. The only thing I really knew about this film before watching it was this shot right here, since it has been all over the internet. There is this narrative that this film was extremely shocking and extremely gory and grisly for its time. I mean, for a film that came out in 1960, this film was pretty graphic. Though since this film came out in France, it's really not that shocking that a film like this exists. Though beyond all the gore, I found this film more disturbing in an upsetting way than a shocking way, if you know what I mean. I just can't get over how tragic this film was. I especially feel extreme sympathy for our main character, Christine, who is practically her father's lab rat. Her father is performing experiments on her to restore her face to its former glory, but his methods are extremely twisted and vile. But while in the process of all this, her father forces Christine to wear this deeply unsettling mask that apparently inspired the Michael Myers mask, based on its emotional blankness. Though unlike Michael Myers, our main character under the mask is screaming and crying for help. As I said, this film was deeply unsettling. This film is on HBO Max, and I would highly recommend giving it a watch. This film was absolutely demolished by critics. I don't think this film is as bad as a lot of people are saying it is, but I thought it was pretty mid. Tonally, this film is just a complete mess. We have one scene with your typical jokey Marvel humor, and then literally minutes afterwards, we see Kang committing mass murder. Yes, MODOK is just as bad as everyone says he is. He literally looks like he was ripped straight from Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Seriously, Marvel, for the love of God, stop overworking your VFX artists. I mean, this isn't the worst Marvel movie I've seen. I would honestly take this any day over something like Eternals or Love and Thunder. The one aspect that I think really keeps this film afloat, that really makes this film worthwhile, is Jonathan Majors as Kang the Conqueror. He just absolutely chews the scenery in this film. I just love how much of a menace his character is. I'm not exactly a fan of where they took his character in the latter half of this film, but I just still deeply enjoyed seeing this character on screen. Though I'm not entirely surprised that this film came out pretty mid. It still has me deeply worried for the future of the MCU, because it feels like that Marvel has been cranking out quantity over quality. I've been getting into some films from the French New Wave. This is the second film by Godard that I've watched. This might get me assassinated, but I liked it a little better than Breathless. I thought the characters here were a lot more memorable than they were in Breathless, and I just enjoyed how much heart this film had. I also really enjoyed the dynamic between our three main characters, and how they really didn't know what they were doing when it came to the theft. And this film painted them as terrible criminals. Also, a little fun fact, Quentin Tarantino would name his little production studio, A Band Apart, after this film. It is very clear that Tarantino would take some inspiration with this film, especially the scene where our characters are doing the Madison. One minor gripe, I thought this film's ending was kind of confusing and anticlimactic. Though this isn't really an issue with the film itself, it's just more or less kind of annoying, but I really had trouble finding a good copy of this film. I ended up using the Internet Archive, but my TV wasn't able to load the subtitles, so I just ended up watching it on my iPad, which I really don't like doing. This is yet another film nominated for Best Picture, and I thought this was pretty solid. This is a fun little clever satire about high-class society. The first act of this film perfectly sets up these characters and their major flaw, which is their vanity. This exposes how deeply insecure these people are. Once we go on the yacht, this film focuses more on the background players and just how out of touch these people are. There's a really funny gag involving a grenade. If you've seen this film, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, but I don't want to go into any more detail spoiling it. Though I think during the third act, this film really peters out pacing-wise. It really begins to show its hefty runtime of 2.5 hours, but I really dug this film's ending. I had the privilege of seeing this on the big screen. This is one of my favorite dark comedies. Robert De Niro gives such a chaotic performance that I feel like only he could pull off. He is able to bring this performance down to earth, to the point where it is actually pretty disturbing, which I think is what Scorsese and De Niro was trying to go for here. I completely buy Rupert's struggle in this film. Like, he's a pretty talented comedian, but no matter how hard he tries, he just isn't heard, he isn't seen. And I completely buy why that would burn him out completely and honestly drive him insane. The pacing here is very tight and fast-paced. I was never bored watching this film. I think that the pacing of this film is supposed to ride off the energy of Rupert and just the chaotic energy he gives off. I do feel like that this film hits a lot of the same beats that Taxi Driver hit. I mean, this film isn't a blatant ripoff of Taxi Driver, but it's hard not to draw the comparisons. I finished the month off with my favorite Damien Chazelle film, Whiplash. This film perfectly depicts the grueling and soul-crushing pressures of being a perfectionist. Our main character, Andrew Neiman, is put through the ringer in this film and forced down a path of perfectionism by the ruthless Terrence Fletcher. J.K. Simmons gives such a terrifying performance in this film. This performance can easily come across as very over the top, but J.K. Simmons manages to balance this performance out. In one scene, he can be completely chill and approachable, and just by the flip of a switch, he is just a complete monster. Also, the editing here is nothing short of masterful. The scenes in which Andrew Neiman is practicing the drums all day, all night, and his face is dripping with sweat, his hands are bleeding, and in a fit of rage, he punches the drum set. All of these events happen in very quick cuts, which causes a great deal of stress on the audience. This movie is extremely stressful and high octane. It actually kind of reminded me of Uncut Gems in that way. Just thinking about this movie causes my blood pressure to rise, but in a good way, I guess. And that was my month of February. And anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, make sure to give this video a like. And if you want more content like this, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell notification so you can be notified every time I upload a new video. And shout out to the Triceratops and the Goo Goo Dolls. Thanks for watching.